The first time I heard the screams coming from Black Hollow Manor, I was 10 years old, hiding behind my father in the freezing rain while the villagers crossed themselves and prayed under their breath. Nobody dared walk toward the estate after sunset, and nobody spoke the lady of the house's name out loud anymore. By then, people no longer called her Eleanor Whitmore. They called her the woman behind the black veil, but none of them knew the truth. I do, because this curse began long before the stories, long before the disappearances, and long before the woods became a graveyard for wandering souls. It began with love, betrayal, poison, and a dinner where every man at the table planned to murder someone before the night was over. The village of Ravenshire sat deep within the forests of northern England during the late 1600s, surrounded by endless pine trees and cold gray fog that clung to the earth like smoke. Most people there lived difficult lives. The winters were brutal, the taxes were cruel, and almost everything belonged to one man. Lord Henry Whitmore ruled the land with an iron grip. He owned the mills, the farms, the livestock, and even the homes many families lived in. If someone failed to pay what they owed him, he took whatever he pleased. Sometimes that meant food, sometimes livestock. Sometimes their children were forced into labor inside his vineyards. People feared him more than they respected him. Henry Whitmore was the kind of man who smiled while destroying someone. He enjoyed watching people beg. He drank heavily every night and treated cruelty like entertainment. The servants inside Black Hollow Manor walked quietly around him because even the smallest mistake could send him into a violent rage. I remember hearing stories of stable boys whipped bloody for saddling the wrong horse and maids slapped across the face for serving wine that was too warm. Yet somehow, despite the darkness surrounding him, his wife became the only beautiful thing connected to his name. Lady Eleanor Whitmore was unlike anyone else in Ravenshire. She moved softly, spoke kindly, and treated peasants with more dignity than most nobles ever would. Mothers prayed their daughters would grow into women like her. Even the old priests spoke highly of her gentle spirit. The strange thing was that almost nobody had actually seen her face clearly. Eleanor always wore a long ivory veil that covered everything beneath her eyes. Henry demanded it. He claimed her beauty belonged only to him and forbade anyone else from looking upon her uncovered face. Some obeyed because they feared him. Others obeyed because they respected her. One man obeyed while secretly falling hopelessly in love with her. His name was Samuel Carter, Lord Whitmore's personal servant. Samuel had worked inside Black Hollow Manor since he was a teenager. He was clever, calm under pressure, and trusted more than anyone else in the estate. Henry relied on him for nearly everything. Samuel poured his wine, managed his affairs, prepared his horse, and carried out tasks nobody else dared handle. That trust became the Lord's greatest mistake. Samuel and Eleanor spent years near one another inside those cold stone halls. At first, their conversations were harmless. Small moments in quiet corridors, shared glances during dinner preparations, brief talks in the gardens while Henry drowned himself in wine. Over time, those moments became something far deeper. Samuel saw bruises beneath Eleanor's sleeves. He heard her crying behind locked doors after Henry stumbled drunkenly through the manor at night. He watched the life slowly drain from her eyes. And Eleanor saw something in Samuel that no one else offered her. Safety, kindness, hope. They fell in love slowly, painfully, and completely. Samuel begged her countless times to run away with him. He promised they could disappear into another village where Henry's influence meant nothing. He swore he would spend the rest of his life protecting her. But Eleanor always refused him for the same reason. She believed marriage was sacred. No matter how cruel Henry became, no matter how badly he treated her, she believed abandoning her vows would damn her soul. Eleanor was deeply religious and carried guilt like chains around her heart. She loved Samuel, but she could never bring herself to leave her husband while he still lived. Eventually, Samuel realized there was only one way they could ever truly be together. Henry Whitmore had to die. The plan came to him during one of the Lord's drunken rants about neighboring landowners. Henry constantly fought with nearby nobles over trade routes, taxes, and territory disputes. Nearly every powerful man around Ravenshire hated him. Samuel carefully suggested that hosting a grand dinner might repair some of those relationships. He spoke about peace, alliances, and mutual prosperity. Henry liked the idea immediately because he loved appearances. He wanted people to admire him even if they secretly despised him. Invitations were sent across the countryside. Within weeks, several rival lords agreed to attend a feast at Black Hollow Manor. Samuel knew it was the perfect opportunity. On the night of the dinner, the manor glowed with candlelight while storms rolled across the forest outside. Servants hurried through crowded hallways carrying roasted meats, fresh bread, and silver goblets filled with deep red wine from Henry's private cellar. The dining hall overflowed with false smiles and hidden hatred. Every noble seated at that table secretly wished at least one other man there would die before sunrise. Eleanor sat quietly beside her husband beneath her ivory veil while Samuel moved between guests refilling drinks. Nobody noticed when he slipped into the kitchen alone. Hidden inside his sleeve was a small vial of poison stolen from the estate gardener weeks earlier. Samuel's hands trembled while he uncorked it above Henry's goblet. He told himself this was mercy. He told himself Eleanor would finally be free. One quick pour into the wine and it would all be over. But Henry Whitmore was cruel, not stupid. For months he had noticed the looks Samuel gave Eleanor. He saw how quickly she relaxed whenever the servant entered the room. Henry suspected betrayal long before either lover realized it themselves. He simply waited for proof. That evening, shortly before dinner began, Henry quietly entered the kitchen carrying poison of his own. He planned to eliminate Samuel during the feast and later accuse one of his political enemies for the murder. What Henry did not know was that several of the visiting lords had arrived with similar intentions. Each man saw the gathering as the perfect chance to eliminate rivals without suspicion falling upon them. Throughout the evening, multiple guests slipped away from the table under different excuses. One claimed he needed air. Another requested fresh wine. Another complained of illness. Each secretly visited the kitchen. Each carried poison. By the time dinner officially began, death sat hidden inside nearly every bottle and goblet in Black Hollow Manor. The storm outside worsened while thunder shook the windows. Servants lit more candles as Henry rose from his chair holding a silver cup high into the air. His face glowed with arrogant satisfaction. He announced a toast to peace, prosperity, and long life for every man seated at his table. The room echoed with false laughter. Goblets rose together. Everyone drank. For several seconds nothing happened. Then chaos exploded. One lord suddenly grabbed his throat and collapsed sideways onto the table. Another began coughing blood onto his plate. Henry himself stumbled backward, eyes wide with horror as dark liquid spilled from his mouth. Chairs crashed against the floor while nobles screamed accusations at one another between violent choking fits. Some tried reaching for swords while others clawed desperately at their necks as poison burned through their bodies. The deaths happened fast. Within minutes the dining hall became a slaughterhouse. Samuel collapsed beside Eleanor's chair, gasping for air while blood ran from his lips. Henry died staring directly at his servant with pure hatred frozen across his face. Around them the other lords twisted and convulsed across the floor like dying animals. And Eleanor watched every single man she loved perish before her eyes. Her scream echoed through Ravenshire that night. Villagers later swore they heard it from miles away. Most stories would end there. A terrible tragedy. A grim tale of greed and betrayal destroying everyone involved. But that was only the beginning. Something inside Eleanor shattered after the massacre. Perhaps grief destroyed her sanity. Perhaps evil already lingered in the manor long before that dinner. Whatever the reason, she changed completely after that night. The servants who survived later described her walking silently through the blood-soaked hall for hours while staring at the bodies. She never cried, never spoke, never removed her veil. Eventually, she ordered every servant to leave the estate until morning. When they returned, the bodies were gone. Nobody knew what she had done with them. The truth was far worse than anyone imagined. Alone inside Black Hollow Manor, Eleanor dragged each corpse down into the wine cellar one by one. The task took nearly the entire night. Her dress became stained with blood and mud while she forced heavy bodies across cold stone floors. She placed Henry, Samuel, and the other dead nobles inside massive wooden wine barrels normally used for fermentation. Then she sealed the containers shut and left them buried beneath the manor. Down there in darkness, surrounded by wine and decay, the dead began to rot together. The following year confused everyone in Ravenshire because Eleanor transformed into an unexpectedly strong ruler. She dismissed cruel overseers, lowered taxes, and provided food to struggling families during winter. People who once feared Black Hollow Manor slowly began viewing Eleanor as a blessing. She still wore a veil, but now it was black instead of ivory. Nobody questioned it. Most assumed she mourned her husband, and perhaps she did, but grief consumed her in ways no one understood. As the anniversary of the dinner approached, Eleanor became withdrawn and unstable. Servants heard footsteps wandering the manor at strange hours. Some claimed voices echoed from beneath the cellar floor at night. Others swore they smelled decay drifting through the halls despite the estate remaining spotless. On the exact anniversary of the feast, Eleanor descended into the wine cellar carrying a silver goblet and a candle. The barrels waited exactly where she had left them. Something compelled her to open one. The smell nearly made her faint. Rotting flesh floated inside dark wine thickened by death and time. But Eleanor no longer cared about horror. She wanted release. She believed traces of poison still remained inside the liquid. If she drank enough, perhaps she could finally escape the nightmare her life had become. So she filled the goblet. Then she drank. At first nothing happened. Then the screaming began. Eleanor collapsed onto the cellar floor while agony ripped through her body. It felt like fire spreading through her veins. She clawed at her throat as unfamiliar memories flooded her mind. Rage, greed, violence. Cruel desires that did not belong to her crashed against her thoughts like waves. Henry Whitmore was inside the wine, not his body, his soul. The poison had killed the men, but something darker trapped their consciousness within the barrels where their corpses fermented together. When Eleanor drank the wine, she absorbed a piece of them into herself, especially Henry. After that night, people noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She remained elegant and composed in public, but servants began disappearing after angering her. A farmer who insulted the estate vanished while returning home through the woods. A thief accused of stealing wine was later found hanging from a tree with his face torn apart by animals. Eleanor stopped aging as well. Years passed, then decades. Yet the woman beneath the black veil remained unchanged. The rumors spread quickly through surrounding villages. Some believed she practiced witchcraft. Others claimed the devil himself lived beneath Black Hollow Manor. Travelers reported seeing a tall woman wandering the forest at night carrying a lantern while inviting lost strangers back to her estate for wine and shelter. Most who followed her never returned. Those who did were never seen afterward. One woodsman stumbled into Ravenshire babbling about a woman with too many voices speaking from beneath her veil. Another claimed he saw human faces moving inside her wine goblet like trapped spirits screaming underwater. A priest sent to investigate disappeared entirely. Only his cross was found near the manor gates covered in dried blood. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued drinking from the barrels hidden below Black Hollow Manor. Every soul she consumed extended her life. Every soul deepened her madness. Over time, the voices inside her multiplied. Henry was no longer alone within her mind. The rival lords, wandering travelers, missing servants, and unfortunate strangers all became part of something monstrous growing behind the veil. She stopped being Eleanor Whitmore long ago. She became something else entirely. Nearly 70 years after the dinner massacre, a young woman named Abigail Turner entered the forest searching for food during a brutal winter. Her family was starving, and desperation pushed her deeper into the woods than anyone normally dared travel after sunset. Snow covered the ground while freezing wind howled through the trees. Abigail carried only a small basket and a wooden cross hanging around her neck. She had heard the stories about the veiled woman, but hunger made people brave foolish things. That was when she saw the lantern. A tall figure stood between the trees dressed entirely in black. The veil covering her face fluttered gently in the wind while pale fingers held the glowing lantern low beside her body. The woman spoke softly. She told Abigail she looked cold, hungry, tired. She offered warmth, shelter, and wine. Abigail later described the voice as strangely beautiful. It wrapped around her thoughts like music. Every instinct telling her to run slowly faded away while the woman guided her deeper into the forest. Abigail felt calm walking beside her, almost dreamlike, as if the world around them no longer mattered. Then they reached the ruins of Black Hollow Manor. By then the estate had partially collapsed from age and neglect. Dead vines strangled the walls while broken windows stared into the darkness like hollow eyes. Yet candlelight still flickered inside. The veiled woman turned toward Abigail and reached for her hand. At that moment, Abigail accidentally touched the wooden cross resting against her chest. The effect was immediate. The strange fog clouding her thoughts vanished instantly. Terror slammed into her all at once. The air around the woman suddenly smelled rotten, like wet graves and spoiled wine. Abigail stumbled backward, clutching the cross tightly while whispering prayers through trembling lips. The veiled figure recoiled violently. For the first time, fear entered her voice. Abigail demanded to know who she was. For several long seconds the woman stood perfectly still beneath the falling snow. Then dozens of voices answered at once from beneath the veil. Men, women, young, old, some screaming, some whispering, some laughing, all speaking together in horrifying harmony. "We are many," Abigail said. The veil shifted slightly as the wind blew across the courtyard. For one terrible moment she glimpsed what waited underneath. Not a face. Faces, human features twisted together beneath pale flesh like trapped souls pressing outward from inside her skin. Mouths opened and closed across her cheeks and throat, while empty eyes blinked from impossible places. And somewhere among them all, one pair of eyes silently begged for mercy. Abigail ran through the snow without looking back. The voices screamed behind her from deep within the forest, echoing between the trees until dawn finally broke over Ravenshire. Nobody ever saw the veiled woman again after that winter. But even now, centuries later, travelers passing through those woods still speak of strange lights moving between the trees after dark. Some hear whispers inviting them toward the ruins of an old manor hidden deep in the forest. Others claim they smell wine where no vineyard exists. And if the wind is quiet enough, they say you can still hear many voices speaking together from somewhere beyond the trees, waiting for someone new to join them.